let's move on to the second winner, Maunga. Your paper is on logging, dismantling the dark web of Africa's timber industry. Again, tell us a little bit about where you're from, and then we'll go into your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Raymond. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Maunga. I'm a research analyst from Zambia, from the capital city of Lusaka. I hold a degree in actuarial science from the University of Zambia, and I'll be starting my master's degree in international politics at the University of South Africa early next year. My work is mostly focused on economic development and sustainability. Currently, I'm a freelance researcher and writer, and my most recent work was writing a piece on Africa's military regimes for an African magazine. So moving forward, I hope to work in the field of international trade and development, with a focus on using policy analysis to improve socio-economic outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maunga, and we look forward to your presentation. You've certainly focused on an issue, enormous amounts of timber moving out of Africa, almost all of it underpriced. It's basically a theft of resources. Look forward to your presentation. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this presentation. I'm really excited to discuss the topic of my essay, which focuses on the illegal timber trade in Africa. The illegal timber trade involves the unlawful harvesting, transporting, and selling of wood, or what we call illegal logging. Today, I want to share what I've learned about this issue, why it matters, and how we can make a difference. Let's begin by looking at the bigger picture, which is the global scale of the illegal timber trade. One of the important concepts here is illicit financial flows, or IFFs. These are illegal movements of money across borders and are often tied to things like tax evasion, corruption, and criminal activity. Now let's look at this table here. It shows some of the biggest transnational crimes in the world. At the top, we have the counterfeits industry, followed by drug trafficking. And then illegal logging comes in third place and generates as much as $157 billion a year. And remember, these numbers could be much higher because IFFs are very hard to track and measure. This just shows that illegal logging isn't only an environmental issue, it's a global criminal industry on the same financial scale as human trafficking. So now let's focus on Africa. Africa's forests are some of the most biodiverse in the world. They cover over 600 million hectares, which is roughly about 16% of the world's forest cover. These forests are vital, not just for Africa, but for the global climate because they absorb carbon dioxide and provide livelihoods for millions of people. So between 50 and 90% of Africa's timber trade is illegal. This range just shows how poor the regulation across the continent is. Every year, Africa loses about 3.9 million hectares of forest to illegal logging, and the financial loss is about $17 billion annually. To put that into perspective, that is much higher than the GDP of some African countries. So let's consider a key factor behind these numbers, and that is rosewood. Between 2005 and 2014, rosewood accounted for 35% of the value of all wildlife seizures. And if you look at the picture on your left, you can understand why. Rosewood is known for its rich red hue with dark streaks, which gives it that luxurious, elegant look. Now, genuine rosewood refers to several species within the Dalbergia genus, and it's normally found in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. However, many species of wood that resemble rosewood are often traded under its name. This makes it much harder to regulate because Traffickers can easily disguise other types of wood as rosewood. And beyond its appearance, rosewood is valued for its durability and aromatic properties. It's used to make high-end furniture, musical instruments, and decorative items because its smooth texture is ideal for carving and polishing. These properties have made rosewood the most trafficked wildlife product in the world, surpassing even ivory and rhino horn. You can find certain species of rosewood fetching up to $50,000 per cubic meter. So the demand for rosewood on a global scale is extremely high. In the early 2000s, Europe was the top market for African timber. But as regulations tightened in Europe, African exports dropped dramatically from about $1.4 billion to $600 million within the space of 10 years. But demand started coming from another part of the world, and that was in Asia, specifically China. This map on the right shows a study conducted on the exploitation of rosewood across Southeast Asia. Large patches in countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, and parts of China were found to have medium vulnerability to overexploitation. So this indicates that rosewood in these regions is being heavily depleted. And so because rosewood in Asia was becoming rare, countries like China, Vietnam, and India had to look elsewhere to meet their needs, and Africa became a key source of supply. The demand has been so high that between 2008 and 2018, Africa's share of rosewood exports to China rose from 40% to 90%. So let's try and visualize this market transition from Europe to Asia. These two diagrams here compare timber exports from Africa to Asia in the year 2000 and in the year 2022. So in 2000, you can see that the amount of timber exports to Asia was quite low, with only a small portion of Africa's timber going to countries like China and India. Because at that time, Europe was still the dominant market for African timber. Fast forward to 2022, and that is no longer the case. The diagram on the right shows a substantial increase in the amount of timber being exported to Asia, particularly to China. So this shows how Asian markets have emerged as the primary consumers of African timber. The demand for high-value species, especially rosewood, has been behind this change. And as we discussed earlier, the trade has increased as countries in Asia look to Africa to fill the gaps left by decrease in their own local resources. So we talked about the high demand coming from China in particular, and the main reason behind this is Hongmu. So Hongmu is a collective term for several species of rosewood used to make traditional Chinese furniture dating back to the Ming Dynasty. So this type of traditional furniture has been popular for centuries and is often seen as a symbol of status in Chinese culture. So as more people in China have become wealthy, the demand for high quality, luxurious furniture like Hongmu has increased. By 2014, the market for rosewood furniture in China was valued at almost $26 billion. If you look at the picture of these antique Hongmu chairs on the right, you see that they are being sold for almost 5,000 pounds. So this shows how much people are willing to pay for these luxury items. And you also notice that the chairs have the deep red hue characteristic of rosewood that we discussed earlier. But rosewood isn't the only precious wood in high demand. Other woods like ebony, sandalwood, and blackwood are also highly sought after. For example, A-grade red sandalogs, which are a type of sandalwood, can fetch between $130,000 and $200,000 per ton. Now, let's discuss the size and scope of the timber trade. And to do that, we need to know about the Congo Basin, which is of strategic importance in the industry. The map here shows the forest cover in Africa, and you can see that the Congo Basin stands out as a very dense, dark green area right in the central part of the continent. The Congo rainforest covers over 3.4 million square kilometers, which is the second largest in the world after the Amazon rainforest. The forest has a variety of wildlife and acts as an important carbon sink by helping to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The Congo Basin produces approximately 80% of Africa's total timber volume, and each year about 3 million cubic meters of timber are exported from this region, and much of it is harvested illegally. In fact, the total export value of illegally sourced, processed, and unprocessed timber was estimated to be about $520 million in 2014. Now let's look at some parameters under size and scope. First is how much forest Africa has been losing over the years. And if we look at some specific countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo has been losing at least 500,000 hectares of forest every year since 2010. And in some of those years, the forest loss has gone over 1 million hectares. It's actually one of the hardest hit countries in Africa when it comes to deforestation. In Mozambique, over the last 20 years, about 4 million hectares of forest have been lost. This has been a serious problem, especially for the communities that rely on these forests. Cameroon lost about 657,000 hectares of forest between 2001 and 2014, and a lot of that is because of illegal logging. So between 2010 and 2020, the entire continent lost an average of 3.9 million hectares of forest each year. Now let's talk about the financial losses. As we mentioned earlier, Africa loses nearly $17 billion every year because of illegal logging. So let's look at a few country profiles. Cameroon loses about $60 million every year because of the illegal timber trade. In Mozambique, the illegal trade is costing the economy about $500 million per year. That's about $500 million, which is very concerning because Mozambique is one of the most poor countries in the world. Zambia loses about $3.2 million in potential revenue every year due to this illegal trade. And while that might seem smaller compared to other countries, it's still a significant loss given the size of Zambia's economy. So these numbers show just how much illegal timber trading is hurting the financial well-being of these countries. And bear in mind, these are some of the world's poorest nations, and this is money that could have been used to improve local economies, build infrastructure, and support communities. Now let's look at some statistics on trade in different countries. If we look at Ghana from 2015 to 2019, nearly $300 million worth of rosewood was illegally exported to China. And this actually happened during times when the government had imposed export bans. Between 2014 and 2017, Nigeria was exporting an average of 5,600 logs of rosewood every day to China. That's about 2,800 trees being cut down every day just to meet the demand. In Zambia, the export of mukula, which is a local name for rosewood, skyrocketed, going from 2.5 million in 2013 to over $62 million in 2018. So that's an increase of almost 60 million within the space of 5 years. And in Madagascar, over 350,000 rosewood and ebony trees were illegally cut down and exported to places like China, Malaysia, and Mauritius between the years 2009 and 2014. So these numbers show how illegal timber exports are booming across Africa despite bans and regulations. Now let's talk about the key players involved in the illegal timber trade. This trade isn't just driven by local people cutting down trees. It's a much bigger network and involves several types of actors working together to make this industry thrive. First, we have the criminal networks, that run this trade with the same level of organization as drug cartels. These networks often stretch across several countries with complex supply chains that help clean the illegally harvested wood and push it into legal markets. What makes this trade so attractive to criminals is the low risk. Compared to drug or human trafficking, the penalties for illegal logging are much lighter, but the profits are still huge. Plus, enforcement is weak, making it easy for these criminals to operate. Another major group is the mafia-style organizations. These groups control large areas of forests, especially in countries where the government is too weak to stop them. They often charge local loggers to access the forest, using violence or threats to stay in control. Then there are the foreign actors, who are mainly international companies and individuals who either finance or buy the illegal timber. Many of these are large corporations that need timber for products sold worldwide. Whether they know it or not, they keep the trade going by failing to make sure the wood they buy is legally sourced. Next, we have the private sector actors, which are legitimate businesses like sawmills and timber traders who might be knowingly or unknowingly buying illegally sourced timber. In some cases, the illegal timber gets mixed with legal wood, making it hard to tell them apart. And so these businesses end up playing a role in the illegal trade. Finally, we have the state-embedded actors. These are corrupt government officials who play a big role in allowing the trade to continue. Corruption is one of the main reasons this industry thrives. Officials take bribes to look the other way or issue fake permits or documentation. A lot of times, top state officials are involved, making it almost impossible to stop the illegal trade from the top down. The mechanisms of the timber trade are equally complex. It's a well-organized process that involves several key stages, but we can break it down into four main parts. First, of course, we have illegal logging. This is where it all starts. Small-scale loggers, often working without permits, cut down high-value species like rosewood in protected areas. They target these rare and valuable trees, many of which are listed as endangered, to meet the growing demand, particularly from Asia. These loggers usually work for larger networks and are often paid a fraction of the profits made from the wood they harvest. Next comes transportation and border crossing. After the trees are cut, the timber is handed over to middlemen who are responsible for moving it across borders. These middlemen use a variety of tactics to avoid detection. They'll falsify documents like permits or certificates of origin to make the timber appear legal. They also bribe officials at checkpoints and border crossings to let their shipments through without proper inspection. In many cases, these middlemen use well-known smuggling routes and take advantage of weak law enforcement in remote areas. This makes it easy for the timber to move between countries unnoticed. Once the timber reaches another country, it enters the processing phase. This is where things get really tricky. The wood is often processed into sawn timber, furniture, or other products. By the time it's processed, it becomes nearly impossible to trace its illegal origin. Processed wood can look exactly the same as legally sourced wood, and it's at this stage that illegal timber gets mixed with legal wood, which makes it even harder to identify. The final stage is marketing and sale. At this point, the timber is ready to be sold in international markets. By now, it usually has fraudulent documentation that claims it was legally harvested. The timber is then sold to buyers in places like China, Vietnam, and Europe. By the time it reaches stores or furniture showrooms, it's almost indistinguishable from legally sourced timber. This is what makes it so challenging for authorities to stop the illegal trade. Once the wood is processed and mixed with legal products, it's very hard to tell what's illegal and what's not.
Like any organized criminal activity, illegal logging can have far-reaching impacts that touch the environment, economies, and communities. Let's start with environmental impacts. Illegal logging has a huge effect on our planet. First, it destroys biodiversity. Forests are home to about 80% of the world's species, and when trees are cut down illegally, we lose habitats for countless plants and animals. In fact, we're losing about 137 species every day in tropical rainforests. This isn't just a local problem, it affects the balance of life on Earth. It also contributes to climate change. Trees help absorb carbon from the atmosphere, but when they are removed, that comes to an end. This means more carbon stays in the air, making global warming worse. Places like the Congo Basin are crucial in fighting climate change, so losing these forests is a big issue. Finally, illegal logging causes deforestation, which harms local economies. For example, Kenya lost about $68 million in 2010 due to deforestation. Forests help keep the land fertile, and without them, the land degrades, which also affects farming and livelihoods. Now let's move on to economic impacts. Illegal logging costs the government millions, if not billions of dollars, because it bypasses taxes and regulations. This is money that could have gone into things like healthcare or education, but instead it goes into the hands of corrupt networks. It also hurts legal timber businesses because illegal timber is sold at lower prices. This makes it hard for companies that follow the rules to compete, which also leads to job losses. Plus, the illegal timber trade distorts the market by pushing prices down and making it even harder for legal businesses to survive. Lastly, let's look at the social impacts. Illegal logging disrupts the lives of local communities. Many people rely on forests for farming and resources, and when these forests are destroyed, their way of life is also threatened. It also leads to exploitation. In many cases, people, including children, are forced to work in terrible conditions for very little pay. In some places, workers earn as little as $1.38 per log. This work is dangerous, with reports of workplace accidents and even deaths. Finally, illegal logging fuels conflict. In regions where armed groups operate, they often use profits from illegal timber to fund their activities, therefore contributing to violence and instability across Africa. For example, the rebel group MFDC in Senegal uses profits from illegal logging to support their insurgency. So, if timber trafficking is causing these damaging effects, why does it continue to be such a big problem? Well, there are several reasons for this, and I'll go through a few of them. The obvious one is economic incentives. There's a high global demand for timber, especially for woods like mahogany and rosewood. Many of the loggers involved are often disadvantaged people in desperate need of money. They see illegal logging as one of the few ways to earn a living. Meanwhile, the people who buy this timber can sell it for huge profits in international markets. This gap between the low pay for loggers and the high prices in the market drive the illegal trade forward. Next, we have social-political factors. In areas with conflict, illegal logging can become a source of money. For example, armed groups involved in fighting may use the money they get from illegal timber to fund their operations, which mostly involves buying more weapons. This makes it difficult to stop the illegal logging because it's tied to larger issues of violence and instability. The third reason is weak governance and corruption. Corruption is key to the illegal timber industry because it's very hard to conceal timber logs when moving across the border. This requires people in positions of authority, like government officials and law enforcement, to be complicit in the process. When officials accept bribes or turn a blind eye, it allows illegal activities to continue without punishment because people know they can easily get away with the crime. The next one is related to global trade dynamics. Many African countries export timber to places where the laws are not strict. In these markets, buyers might overlook where the wood is legally sourced. This lack of regulation allows illegal timber to flow more freely into international markets. Finally, we have cultural and geographical factors. Africa's vast forests are hard to monitor, which makes it easier for illegal loggers to operate without being caught. Plus, in some communities, people may not fully understand the environmental impact of cutting down trees. They might prioritize immediate financial gain over long-term sustainability, leading to more illegal logging. Given the factors driving illegal timber, it's clear that effective solutions are needed. Let's shift to how we can address these challenges through targeted reforms and sustainable practices. First, we have timber parks, like the ones tested in DR Congo. These parks centralize logging activities in controlled areas, making it easier for authorities to oversee and manage. This helps reduce illegal logging and ensures sustainable methods are followed. Timber parks can also create jobs and give local communities legal alternatives to illegal logging. Next, we need to strengthen legal frameworks. This means improving laws across countries to close loopholes and make sure law enforcement is better trained and equipped to handle illegal logging. Independent oversight bodies can help hold people accountable, and civil society organizations can push for better laws and regulations. Another key proposal is to address conflict in areas where illegal logging happens. Strengthening land rights for local communities and investing in peace-building efforts can create more stability, therefore reducing the need for illegal logging as a means of survival. Technology can also play a big role. Satellite monitoring, drones, and blockchain technology can help track logging activities and ensure timber comes from legal sources. Mobile apps can also allow locals to report illegal activities anonymously, therefore helping authorities take action faster. We also need to improve data collection. Standardizing how data is gathered and shared between countries can improve coordination and help combat illegal logging more effectively. Finally, empowering local communities is essential. Programs like Community Forest Management, or CFM, can give locals more control over their resources. Offering alternative livelihoods through agroforestry or ecotourism can reduce their reliance on illegal logging. So these strategies can only do so much when implemented in isolation, but together they can provide a well-rounded strategy to tackle illegal logging. Finally, let's discuss who has the power to effect change in the fight against illegal logging. Each group listed here has an important role to play, and together they can make a big difference. First, we have national governments. They are responsible for enforcing laws and regulations about how forests are used and how timber is traded. By strengthening these laws, improving transparency, and addressing corruption, governments can significantly reduce illegal logging. It's important for them to hold officials accountable and prevent collusion with criminal networks. Next are the companies in their supply chain. These include logging companies, traders, and manufacturers. They can reduce the demand for illegal timber by adopting sustainable sourcing practices and getting certified by organizations like the Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC. By making sure they know where the timber comes from, these companies can help protect the forests. We also have NGOs and civil society organizations. These groups raise awareness about the impacts of illegal logging and hold both governments and companies accountable. They conduct research, expose illegal activities, and push for better policies. Their work is vital for driving change and encouraging collaboration between different stakeholders. Then we have international organizations like the UN Environment Programme and the World Bank. They provide technical support, funding, and policy guidance to help African countries develop sustainable forest management practices. These organizations can help countries work together to combat illegal logging across borders. And then importing countries such as those in Asia, the European Union, and the USA also play a crucial role. By enforcing regulations like EU timber regulation, they can reduce demand for illegal timber. Basically, they need to ensure that the wood being imported is sourced legally and sustainably. Finally, regional bodies like the African Union can help facilitate cooperation among African countries to fight illegal logging. Through partnerships and shared strategies, they can enhance enforcement efforts and address the illegal timber trade effectively. So dealing with illegal timber requires a coordinated effort from all these groups. Each one of them has a unique role, and together they can help make the industry more sustainable. So to conclude, the illegal timber trade poses a serious threat to Africa's forests, economy, and local communities. Throughout this presentation, we've explored the complex web of factors that contribute to this crisis, from economic incentives to high-level corruption. We've also discussed several proposals for reform that can help stop illegal logging, such as strengthening legal frameworks and using technology for better monitoring. It's clear that effective change requires collaboration between all stakeholders, which includes the government, international organizations, companies, and local communities. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope this presentation has highlighted how urgent it is for all of us to work together to address illegal timber trading in Africa.
Thank you, Maunga. That was excellent. One of the things that attracted us to your paper is that it was so comprehensive. You talked about the scale of the problem, you related it to individual countries, comprehensive ideas on solutions to the problem, very finely composed paper. Throw out a comment before throwing it open to questions. Years ago, I was in Mozambique, and a friend of mine told me the story. He's heads an NGO that works in these in the broad area of illicit financial flows. And he said he called on the Minister of Forestry in Mozambique, and he said to the minister, "Minister, it's my understanding that you own interest in 2 logging companies." And the minister took great offense and said, "That is not correct. The truth is, I own interest in 5 logging companies." So, yes, the problem goes right up to the tops of government levels. Congo, you mentioned in my first book, I said that I thought, and I still think, Congo is the most exploited country on earth. Everything goes out of the Congo underpriced, undervalued, leaving the country in poverty and turmoil. Let's throw it open to your questions. Please, who has a question to address to Maunga? Waiting for any questions. Maunga, rosewood. Back before there was widespread knowledge of the depletion of rosewood, I purchased a number of pieces of furniture made out of rosewood. This goes back to the 1970s. Today, I wouldn't do that, but at that time, I did. It is a beautiful wood. Mahogany is perhaps not quite so much exploited as other woods, but we're talking about a huge problem, and we're talking about a problem that also affects global warming. Trees take carbon out of the air. Here in the United States, people that plant pine trees note that growing pine trees take a ton of carbon out of the air per acre per year. And of course, tropical forests do the same thing. So we're dealing with a problem that not only is costing countries foreign exchange earnings, but we're also talking about a problem that is affecting global warming. Please, your questions? The destination of these woods. China has certainly become a major importer of stolen timbers that are underpriced going out of Africa. Maunga, talk a little bit more, if you can, about how do you get to China? How do you get to their thinking? How do you, I mean, China has a huge presence in Africa, and some of it is very, very good. I guess, building roads and buildings and rails and so forth, but some of it is highly corrupt. How do you get to the thinking of a country that this kind of dual approach is perhaps as harmful as it is good? What is your thinking on that?
Yeah, so in recent years, China has invested a lot in Africa. So like in Zambia specifically, they do a lot of infrastructure projects. And so you find that countries end up involving themselves in like a debt trap. So they owe a lot to China, but they're unable to pay back. What we've seen is that governments sort of make deals with China. So they'll say, maybe you can take over this asset in exchange for easy debt, in exchange for easier debt payments. So I think how do I put this? China has it easy compared to other big countries because they've invested a lot in Africa. So with regards to rosewood, you find government officials make deals with China or Chinese countries or Chinese nationals, where they just let this rosewood go for a very, very cheap price. And then in China, you have a big market for rosewood, especially the furniture industry. And in that industry, they sell rosewood at a very, very high price. So if you look at what they pay here to get the rosewood and what they sell in their own country, there's a very minimal loss. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that.
In Zambia, is the Chinese presence evident in the forestry industry?
Yes, in fact, this wasn't actually mentioned in the presentation, but I talked about it in the essay. I think that was 2020 or 2021, there was a high-profile case of the president, the now former president, and his daughter involved in the rosewood trafficking scheme, so to say. So they were using proxies, sort of middlemen who would sell the rosewood to the Chinese nationals. So we saw like an increase of, I think, about 60 million in exports within the space of 5 years, which was very alarming. But no one has been prosecuted over that. So we can't really say if they were guilty or not. But yeah, the Chinese presence has been very heavy in the timber industry.
Any further questions for Maunga? If not, Maunga, again, congratulations. I think your paper is as comprehensive as I have seen on this issue. You touch all the bases. It's a superb piece of work. Thank you very much.